what would you say would be considered long enough and successful enough to be a dynasty? I think certainly we're at the end of Guardiola's.
Are we though? So,
what you think it might just be a blip?
Well, no. I don't think it's a blip. I think it's the end of this Manchester City team. I don't think there is, But if you talk about Sir Alex Ferguson having a dynasty at Manchester United, or Arsene Wenger, it wasn't just one team. It was a multitude of different, variations on a team. And so if Pep was to, and look, I'm not saying this is going to happen, I'm sure we can discuss the ins and outs of it, but if Pep was to bounce back next season and Man City were back in the conversation and then suddenly they won, I don't know, another 2-3 titles in the next 5 years. I don't think he's going to be there for that long, but just out of principle, would that not count as the same dynasty?
Yeah, I think it would. I think there's a lot of questions there. Let's come back to a lot of those questions. Let me just set the tone here. So if you think 2020 to 2024, you've won every single Premier League title, 6 Premier League titles overall for Guardiola, 2 FA Cups, 4 EFL Cups, 1 UEFA Champions League, obviously a treble within all of this, 1 Super Cup, 1 FIFA Club World Cup. Let's talk about the breaking down of, as you say, this team, I think, firstly, because I think it's been really interesting, the sort of change or the sort of, I guess, the kind of cliff edge has come, like the conveyor belt of time has led to this moment this season where you lose Rodri and it just absolutely fell apart. But also, I think within that, there is the changing of the guard of and the evolution, more importantly, of football tactics, what people are willing to do, what they want to do in a game as well, and what they know the opposition are going to do. I think all of those have been a big part in this season because all of a sudden, like literally, I think Gundogan came this summer, didn't he?
Yeah.
When Gundogan came back, everyone was like, wow, genius. Been able to pop him back in. He'll just score goals when you want to because they have this overall control. Twisted. And
I was just trying to do it quietly when
no,
you
it's
carried
fine.
on.
Bless you. I had the same problem. Jack's struggling with his mic there for a second. So, the Bernardo Silva constant, like, I used to say, like, rat, like, just would not kind of stop. There was no question marks really over the overall athleticism of this team.
No.
Going into the start of this season. But I feel like football has changed somewhat. That people know positional play so well now that it was getting in people's way, I think, overall. And something kind of needed to change. And I think with the arrival and absolute acceptance of that mid-block will generally keep you in good stead. And then you sort of work back. It's just made it much harder for that to work. And these balls over the top to Salah, these switches, these quick passes, which I'm here for it. Like that relationism that you've seen from Real Madrid last week or the other week. I think it's just that alongside the transitional play and the lack of athleticism in this group, when you take away Rodri and what he's able to provide for that team, it's absolutely fallen apart. The question that I agree with you is that something that he can retrieve quite quickly?
I think so. I think that rebuild has already kind of started, and it feels like it's going to be like open heart surgery in the summer, doesn't it? When you look at some of the names that are going to leave, and some of the players that were actually, like, everyone kind of lauds Kevin De Bruyne for his creative ability, but he was one of those constant runners from midfield a lot of the time in terms of being that ball carrier, getting City from defence to attack, which I think gets often overlooked a little bit because he's this creative genius and he's got it all on top as well. But that injury towards the back end of last season kind of killed that. They didn't really do enough in the summer to kind of, like I said, Gundogan was brought back in. They didn't really do much other than bring.
He's not a ball carrier though.
He was not at all. And I think the game that really highlighted it for me was when they lost away to Aston Villa, and you saw Morgan Rogers just. He's done it to so many teams so far this season, like pick the ball up in the centre circle and just drive through that City midfield with so much ease. And it was like, that was the game, although it was only a few months ago now, and they've lost games in probably worse manners, that they got beaten at home by Man United, by Tottenham as well. But when you look at how other teams have kind of recruited around City and how City sort of stood still, which is something that they've never really done. Like, they've always been willing to, if players aren't really happy there, they've always been willing to kind of refresh the squad. They've always got the core members of it, but they've refreshed quite frequently around it. And to not do anything in the summer, and then when you look at the way that the recruitment has gone in the Premier League around them, it was very odd. And then they've obviously gone so big in January, and that's going to continue into the summer with the amount of players that are leaving. It feels like maybe with Marmoush, they've kind of stepped towards that a little bit of someone who is really good in transition. He's so much more than just that. Like, that's the thing. Like, sometimes you see these really good ball carriers in the Premier League now, and you don't just want to pigeonhole them into just being good in transition because they offer so much more.
Yeah. Also find them. Marmoush,
Yeah.
I don't think I've enjoyed a player's movement as much as his in a long time. But they don't pass the ball to him.
No.
Like, they don't play. Like, he does this double move where he drops and goes. They don't just pop it over the top. Like,
But they've spent so long not doing that, right?
Yes, and they can't
just
see.
ingrained into them. Yeah.
Well, he does it. It's weird because actually Marmoush looks far better and far more assured in terms of when the balls are going to him, not necessarily in his own kind of play on ball, is when Haaland's alongside him.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
totally.
I find this really interesting because obviously Marmoush played for Eintracht this year, and he basically played in a two up top with Hugo Ekitike, and actually the play between the two of them was exceptional. Marmoush was one of the most exciting players in Europe for the first half of this season. But actually that combination and that ability to play off each other was such a huge part of it. And then suddenly you see him without Haaland, you're like, the City players don't know what to do here.
No.
Yeah.
You don't know where they're going with this. They don't know if they're trying to play over the top. They don't know if... And actually the structure of everything fell apart.
Yeah.
And I think that was interesting because suddenly you were like, okay, you go from that win against Newcastle, which, yeah, admittedly, Newcastle were poor,
Yeah.
but to then
But it all kind of briefly came back in that Newcastle game, though, didn't it? With all the kind of dynamics of the squad, or the first 11 kind of clicking into place, with Savinho being that 1v1 threat out wide, Marmoush is making those runs in behind.
Mhm.
All three of Marmoush's goals were all down to his kind of movement on or off the ball.
Yeah.
And Haaland had such a big part, not necessarily directly in all of the goals, but making that space for
But
him.
they
It all
are
kind of clicked together,
Yeah,
didn't it?
you have to have. I saw something the other day was saying, "Oh, sort of striker's dead." That's not true. And you've seen it in these couple of games without Haaland. Because I agree, Marmoush needs someone with him for two reasons. One, to sort of deceive the opposition, but also to push that back line and keep them honest. That if you have someone that stretches it in that way, then you create these gaps in between that he can work with. Or if you imagine Haaland, you think of that first goal against Newcastle, like the total opposite, by kind of like taking off the tension on that back line, by dropping, you then create that space in behind for someone like Marmoush as well. But I think there are some elements here in terms of these players coming through. Marmoush, I think it can be a real jewel in it if you find him, and I think it's great to have him and Haaland. I think they could be devastating, absolutely devastating, if you find him in the way that he wants to be found. And I think that signing to me shows a little bit of humility with Pep Guardiola, that he's not too rigid in his ways. I think that there's been the famous quote about him saying teams play, you've got to be able to change the rhythm of the game now, and that's what we're seeing with Liverpool and Bournemouth. And so it'll be interesting to see how far he steps into that realm and doesn't just like double down on what has created these dynasties at Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and Man City. Because you talk about ball carriers. That I think is a massive, massive problem for this Man City side, because the opposition are able to defend against you pretty easily. And I'm so excited by this. Like, I miss through balls and I miss like a quick ball over the top. Why not?
Yeah.
And I think it's going to have to come back a little bit, because you look at that game and how comfortable Liverpool were against Man City.
Yeah.
But also that the other thing I think is really important here, and in the second podcast we'll talk about this, is that to go through the centre of the pitch is hard now because of the way that teams defend. So the best way of stretching the pitch is Van Dijk get on the ball, play that diagonal to Salah, and Salah's got to be out there. Like everything that we're looking at with Man City at the moment feels a little bit dated,
stale.
Yeah, really stale. And you've got this sort of popping about. If you know, oh, okay, he's going to come stand here, but he's probably going to play it backwards. If you know what's happening, it's not sensational anymore. You've got to be able to take players out of the game. They can't do that.
Which I think with their wingers as well, they've kind of like in some games they've committed to that sort of 4-1-4-1 shape that we've seen with City for so long, and they've gone with two very direct 1v1 wingers in Savinho and Doku. That didn't necessarily work on Sunday. Doku got past Trent so many times, everyone kind of talked about how bad a
To
game
what
Trent
end,
had.
yeah.
There was no end product, really,
Yeah.
was there? But that's also still a young player kind of finding his feet in the league. But we were there also with Sane. Sane was exactly the same 6-7 years ago when he was kind of first brought to the Prem under Pep. He was a different sort of player and a different sort of, I don't know, had a different way of beating players. But what I quite liked about Pep, he's sort of done it a few times this season where he's actually gone and played Savinho on the left and he's kind of just stretched it a little bit more. And there's been a bit more of a threat to City when they've done that. And it's kind of just like you said, things have started to feel a little bit dated, but moving
There's a lack of variance there.
Yeah, but actually a sign of moving forward is actually maybe moving more back to kind of traditional wing play, having a right-footed right winger and a left-footed left winger and kind of stretching it, being able to go round the outside. But Savinho's good enough to come inside as well if he wants to and knit play together. So that's something I think, and it's going to be very interesting as well to see how they add to what they've already done in January and the summer, because the big name they're linked with is Florian Wirtz, and that seems like that's something that might happen as that KDB replacement. And I love Wirtz. I think he's everyone does. It's not, but how does that work in terms of replacing De Bruyne? But again, it's not about replacing De Bruyne. It's about replacing him as a personality in that team, but like moving on from him as well.
Yeah, I think it's replacing him. It's also keeping Haaland happy. Like if you think of that cheat code of that De Bruyne pass, the game against Liverpool, there were several moments where the ball, and they didn't even use the right hand side that much. And actually, one of the few times is when they had the goal that was called offside. That was one of the few times where Marmoush just went, no, I'm going to carry on my right. I'm going to feel this out a little bit. I'm going to see where the space might be. Who can I drag out? And just, like interact with the other players around you, not just stay in your zone.
But I think just in terms of on the Florian Wirtz thing, but also to go back to what you said about physicality earlier on, one of the things that I think has been really interesting about City this season is they can't suffocate teams.
Yeah.
We saw for so many years City sit in and just suffocate. And part of that is obviously Rodri missing because he is the base of this. But I don't think it's all of it. I think, it comes on to an aging squad and not having the legs in there anymore. But also, I think that there is a level that if you bring in a Florian Wirtz, we've just talked about the fact that Marmoush isn't going to be playing as a lone nine. We've just seen Haaland sign a new contract. So you have to play them at the very least in a 9 and a 10.
Yeah.
Maybe as two up top. So are you bringing in Florian Wirtz, who is purely a 10? You're not sticking Florian Wirtz out wide. Now, I appreciate that you need variation and you need to be, and we've talked about these things. But
if you're starting with Wirtz, where are you playing him? If the team begins with him, forget that it's kind of Man City. Where is he playing?
He's playing in the 10.
Is he? So I guess to move it one on then, within Man City's general framework, but you're starting with Wirtz. Where is he? That right-sided?
Yeah, I'd say you start him. I think he can obviously do a job on either side in that he's a drifting player.
Yeah,
but you could start him in either of the advanced eights if you will. But I think one of the things about this is,
so where's Foden playing now?
Also could you, and where do you play Marmoush?
Well, I think Marmoush, it feels like the thing I would say with Marmoush is I feel like I see him as a second striker. So he starts on that same line as Haaland, but then steps back into.
But then where are you getting the extra man from? Right. So as in
what do you mean?
You can't play two advanced eights and a second striker.
No, I think you can play. So you can do it as long as you utterly control the game. But yes, in practice, it's dangerous.
I think you take it onwards to that and be like, okay, so one of Pep's big inventions in the last couple of years was obviously the inverted fullback and tucking in, not let's say reinvention, should we say. But, moving that fullback in and kind of coming away from what we saw with Liverpool, with Trent and Robertson flying forward and assist after assist after assist from those early City teams where we had, fullbacks bombing down the wings to basically not having that width and asking your wingers to provide it.
Yeah.
So is there now a situation where if you aren't getting the width from your foot and if you are looking to go back in terms of trying to get players to go around the outside, do you need to go back to playing fullbacks who are fullbacks?
Yeah.
And what does that look like?
The way they built up against Liverpool, it was 2-3 and you had Rico Lewis and you had Guardiola on that second line with Nico Gonzalez.
Mm-hmm.
If you then take De Bruyne out, put Wirtz there, have Marmoush on the other side, and then you have your two wide players and Haaland up top, you can do that, but it then when you lose the ball, what could occur, unless you can, like you say, utterly suffocate, the danger can be in transition.
I don't know if that team is physical enough to suffocate teams at that point. And that's where I think we're going to struggle in terms of what this City side look like. Now, maybe there's a complete change coming. And actually, if you were to say to me, how do you get Marmoush, Wirtz and Haaland into the same team? I'd say you copy Eintracht Frankfurt and you play 2 strikers up top and a 10 behind, where Mario Götze was playing, and go, okay, right, there you go. That's how you get those 3 in. How do you work everything else work around that question mark, right? But if you are saying we're building the team around these 3 as our kind of attacking stalwarts for the next thing, that's how you set it up. But I can't see Pep going to a 3 at the back. Like, no. I mean, at least on paper,
just bought
right?
Nico Gonzalez.
Yeah, but you could do that. You could play a double pivot then behind Rodri and Nico Gonzalez and sit them in there. But then you need wing backs instead of wingers.
Yeah.
And then you need to have 3 centre backs. So
where does that leave Doku, Savinho? Where does that? It's so hard because
you could probably make Savinho into a wing back, but I don't think you can make Doku into one.
No, they're definitely not.
Can you make Savinho? I'm not sure.
It's probably a better fit than Doku, but again, I think that they've probably got the profile of centre backs to play at 3, haven't they? When you think about Kusanov and his ability to recover, Gvardiol is literally probably the best version of a left-sided centre back for a back 3 in the world.
But is Pep going to do that? I just don't see it. Like, he's a Cruyff disciple.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. So that's it. So, and with every signing, there's that mix and muddying as you evolve.
Yeah.
And then other people come off the other side and leave. You know, De Bruyne, Stones is getting older and is often injured. Walker's now gone. Gundogan is,
Grealish as well.
Grealish
is another player.
Grealish isn't cooked, but Gundogan is.
But Silver as well. All fading or faded.
Poor old Bernardo. He's been run into the crowd.
Poor bloke. Yeah.
Give
he has
that
been
man
utterly
a rest.
exposed. Yeah, he's getting pelters, and I'm like, this is the point of any team, like say Spurs, say Man United, any team, when you take out 1 or 2 pieces, the chemistry can utterly collapse, and therefore that split second when it comes to your pictures, that goes, and then you've hesitated, then you're dead.
Yeah,
and I think that's been part of this as well. So I really, moving on to Liverpool now. I think from the conversation that we've had there's a lot to sort out for Man City. And that's before you go, right, we've got it now. This is our 11, ideally on paper, if everyone's fit, or 15.
Just a last word on that then, because I think that's interesting. Because I wonder if we've got to a point with this Manchester City side, and this is not to criticise Pep in any way, really. It's more kind of just an observation. Have we just got to a point where there are certain players that are just like, we've heard this for so long.
Yeah.
There is no, there's no more that he can squeeze out of me. There is no more that Pep can squeeze out of Bernardo Silva. The toothpaste tube is dry.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I think that maybe it's just time for, and actually for Pep's sake as well, to give him a kind of new lease of life, to bring in a new guard of players who are going to be inspired by working under Pep Guardiola every single day, as opposed to the players who, I don't think they would say we're tired of it, because a lot of them will look to him as, this incredible figure, and rightly so. But I wonder if they're just like, I don't know if I can keep doing this.
Yeah.
And I wonder if just a reset would actually give Pep a spark and this team a spark, just so that it feels fresh again and it feels like he's doing something new. Obviously, the easy thing to do here would be change clubs where you get a new set of players, full stop. But I do think it's interesting that actually maybe this squad refresh might just reinvigorate Pep as much as it would the team.
Yeah, maybe that's the thing. Maybe it is just as simple as we'll kind of get rid of the older guard who have been here for so long and heard the same voices despite winning absolutely everything, and bring in a fresher young set of players who are more open and are going to take everything in like a sponge and try and go again.
What Nico said when he joined the club, right? He was like, I cannot believe this. I grew up in La Masia, which obviously helps, right? But he was like, I cannot believe that Pep was ringing me to say he wanted me to play for him. That's what you need from this next generation.
But 2 things, again, to finish off with this, is that back to right at the start, has Pep got the energy to go through what could very easily and logically be 2-3 years of hurt when it comes to getting these people? Because those names I've just said, like the disrespect I've just shown those players, like Gundogan and what he's done,
he won everything.
De Bruyne and what he's done. I had to hammer him in a video this weekend because he didn't get back, and then he flung his arms in the air. Like, you can't do that. But the guys, these are iconic players. Bernardo Silva is has been an iconic Premier League player. So there's no guarantees that you hope that you pick these players up and they turn into these guys, and maybe that's the magic of Pep. Maybe
when they signed, they weren't all best in the world. I think that is worth noting. Like, obviously, De Bruyne had an excellent season at Wolfsburg, but in the Premier League, was still seen as a bit of a joke figure after what happened
Yeah,
at
the
Chelsea.
conversations that were being had around the price about De Bruyne were.
Yeah,
It was a
but
joke,
Bernardo
wasn't it?
Silva
But the context-
was good at Monaco, but that wasn't best in
No,
class.
I hear that.
Like,
But the context, the reps that this group have had as well in terms of big games, is incredible. But also the context of 2018 and the landscape of football, how effective good positional play can be at that time, as opposed to 2025. It feels different to me. And Pep's idea is not new anymore. He generally goes and finds a new idea that works within his framework, and I'm excited to see the next one. And regardless of what happens, he's still an icon too. But if you have principles and a way, and that way's not working anymore, that's difficult to just go to be open enough to find and then excel in a new way.
Yeah, do plan A better.
Yeah, maybe. And as the trends that we see, like they move so quick, they might just find its way back round because everyone starts playing long ball. Who knows?